On a freezing January night in 2005, a young mother's car was found abandoned on a quiet bridge. The engine still warm, her belongings untouched, but she was nowhere to be found. For nearly 2 decades, her case gathered dust, buried beneath newer crimes and fading memories. No suspects, no answers, no closure. But then, a single forgotten clue inside her car, invisible to the naked eye, cracked the mystery wide open. What investigators uncovered would expose a shocking betrayal and bring justice after 19 long years. It was a cold and snowy night in Portland, Oregon, January 14, 2005. The wind was sharp, and a thin layer of snow covered the quiet streets. Rachel Sullivan, a 32-year-old single mother, had just finished a long day at her job as a marketing director. She was known for her warm smile, kindness, and determination to give her 6-year-old daughter, Kayla, the best life possible. Friends described her as someone who balanced her career and motherhood with incredible strength. She loved reading bedtime stories to Kayla every night, even after exhausting days at work. Rachel left her office around 7:45 p.m. She called her mother, Margaret, on the way to say she'd be stopping briefly to pick up groceries before heading home. She sounded calm, cheerful, and completely normal. That would be the last time anyone in her family ever heard her voice. Around 9:30 p.m., a passing driver noticed a car parked near the St. John's Bridge. The engine was still running, and the headlights cut through the light snowfall. When police arrived, they found Rachel's car empty. Inside were her purse, her mobile phone, and heartbreakingly, Kayla's favorite stuffed rabbit, a toy she never left the house without. It was resting on the passenger seat, as if waiting for Rachel to return, but Rachel was nowhere to be found. The scene confused investigators. There were no signs of a struggle, no footprints leading away from the car, because the falling snow had already started to cover everything. Her phone hadn't been used after the call to her mother. There were no text messages, no goodbye notes, no sudden bank activity. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. News of Rachel's disappearance spread quickly across Portland. Volunteers joined search parties, helicopters scanned the river, and police combed through the nearby woods and neighborhoods. Flyers with Rachel's smiling face were posted on every street corner. Her family appeared on local TV stations begging for information. For weeks, the community held candlelight vigils by the bridge, praying she would be found safe. For little Kayla, the world changed overnight. She was too young to fully understand what had happened, but she knew her mother was gone. She often waited by the window at night, clutching her stuffed rabbit, asking when mommy would come home. Margaret, Rachel's mother, became Kayla's guardian and did everything she could to protect her granddaughter from the growing media frenzy. As the months turned into years, the family faced endless rumors and theories. Some thought Rachel had run away, others believed she had been taken. The lack of answers left everyone stuck between hope and heartbreak. The media attention was intense in the beginning, but like many cases, it slowly faded as time passed. Still, the pain inside Rachel's family never faded. Every anniversary of her disappearance brought new tears. Margaret never missed a single one. She lit a candle each year, placed flowers near the bridge, and promised her daughter she would never stop searching for the truth. Kayla grew older, carrying the weight of unanswered questions no child should have to live with. Rachel's disappearance wasn't just a mystery. It was a wound that never fully healed. A bright, loving woman vanished on an ordinary winter night, leaving behind a little girl, a grieving family, and a community that quietly wondered what really happened on that bridge. In the first few weeks after Rachel Sullivan disappeared, the search was intense. Police officers, volunteers, and even strangers who had never met her came together to look for any trace of the young mother. News stations ran updates daily. Rachel's face was everywhere, on TV, on flyers, on missing person websites. Her family hoped that someone somewhere would recognize her or come forward with information. But as weeks turned into months, and months slowly became years, the case that once seemed urgent began to lose its spotlight. New cases came in, detectives were reassigned, and leads that once seemed promising turned out to be dead ends. By 2010, 5 years after Rachel vanished, the investigation had hit a wall. Witness memories had faded. Some key locations had been developed or changed completely. Technology back then was limited. Security cameras were fewer, and DNA testing was not as advanced as it is today. Investigators had collected evidence, but much of it couldn't be fully analyzed at the time. Rachel's case was officially classified as cold, This meant there were no active leads or developments, but the case remained open, waiting for new information to emerge. For the Sullivan family, this was devastating. The world seemed to move on, but their lives were frozen in 2005. Margaret Sullivan, Rachel's mother, refused to let her daughter's story fade away. She made it her life's mission to keep the case alive. Every month, she visited the Portland Police Department's cold case unit. She would sit with detectives, ask for updates, bring them new tips she'd gathered, and remind them that Rachel was not just another file in a cabinet. She was a daughter, a mother, and a person who deserved answers. Margaret also became a voice for other families of missing people. She attended community meetings, joined advocacy groups, and helped organize vigils to raise awareness for cold cases. Even though the pain of not knowing consumed her, she used it to push for change. Meanwhile, Kayla was growing up. She entered her teenage years carrying the invisible weight of her mother's disappearance. At school, when classmates asked about her parents, she struggled to explain. Some kids whispered cruel things. Others avoided the topic altogether. She learned to hide her pain behind quiet smiles. Her grandmother shielded her from most of the media. But deep down, Kayla always held on to a small piece of hope, that one day she would get the answers she had been waiting for since she was 6 years old. As time passed, the physical evidence from the case was carefully stored away. Rachel's car, her purse, her phone, and other items were kept in secure storage. Detectives believed that one day new technology might be able to uncover details that had been invisible in 2005. By 2015, a full decade had gone by. Many of the original detectives had retired. Some had passed away. The case file had grown thick with reports, tips, and false leads, but it still held one heartbreaking truth. No one knew what had happened to Rachel Sullivan. But even in the quiet halls of the cold case unit, Rachel's name wasn't forgotten. Margaret's visits, media anniversaries, and community vigils kept her story alive. And though no one could see it yet, advances in technology and the persistence of a few determined people were slowly setting the stage for a future breakthrough, one that would come when everyone least expected it. Nearly 2 decades had passed since Rachel Sullivan vanished, and for many, it felt like the case would remain a mystery forever. But in early 2024, something unexpected happened. The Portland Police Department's cold case unit received a special technology grant aimed at re-examining old unsolved cases using modern forensic tools. This grant opened doors that had been closed for years. Detective Camila Ortiz, a dedicated and sharp investigator in her late 30s, had recently joined the cold case team. She had grown up in Portland and remembered seeing Rachel's missing posters as a child. The case had always stayed in the back of her mind. When the grant was announced, Camila knew exactly which file she wanted to reopen first, Rachel Sullivan's. Camila began by pulling every piece of evidence out of storage. The old boxes were covered in dust. Their labels faded with time. Inside were photographs, police reports, clothing, personal items, and every scrap of information collected back in 2005. What might have looked like ordinary objects to someone else were clues waiting to be rediscovered through the lens of modern science. The first step was digitizing everything. Old handwritten reports were scanned and added to a searchable database. Witness statements were carefully reviewed using AI tools that could spot contradictions or patterns that humans might have missed before. Old security camera footage, blurry and nearly useless in 2005, was restored using advanced video enhancement software. Suddenly, images that were once too grainy to analyze became clearer. Next came the forensic evidence. Back in 2005, DNA testing was limited and expensive. Today, forensic labs could detect and analyze even the tiniest trace of DNA. Every item from Rachel's car, the steering wheel, the door handles, her purse, her phone, and even the stuffed rabbit was re-examined using touch DNA technology, which didn't exist when the case began. But the biggest surprise came from a small spiral notebook found in Rachel's car. At the time, investigators had flipped through it and seen nothing unusual, just blank pages and a few scribbles. But in 2024, new technology called ESDA, electrostatic detection apparatus, allowed detectives to detect indented writing, marks left on pages from writing on the sheets above. When the notebook was tested, faint impressions appeared. Rachel had written down several cryptic notes, addresses, dates, and 2 mysterious letters. These notes had been invisible for almost 19 years. Now they were crystal clear. The addresses pointed to locations in Portland that Rachel had visited shortly before she disappeared. and the initials SM would soon lead detectives to a powerful connection. Detective Camila's excitement grew with each new discovery. She called in forensic genealogists, digital experts, and financial analysts to form a small task force dedicated solely to Rachel's case. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, real progress was being made. Rachel's family was contacted. Margaret, now older but still strong, sat across from Camila in the police station as the detective gently explained the new developments. Tears filled Margaret's eyes. She had waited so long for someone to truly care about her daughter's case again. Kayla, now a young woman, also joined the meetings. She wanted to be involved, to understand what happened to her mother. The reopening of the case didn't just bring new evidence, it brought back hope. Hope that had been buried under years of silence. Hope that one day the truth would finally come out. And behind that hope was a team of determined people armed with tools that didn't exist when Rachel disappeared. What they were about to uncover would shock everyone, and finally break open the mystery that had haunted Portland for 19 long years. The discovery of the mysterious initials SM in Rachel's old notebook became the turning point of the investigation. Detective Camila Ortiz and her team were determined to uncover their meaning. They started by digging through Rachel's old contacts, work records, and any person in her life whose name matched those initials. After days of searching, one name stood out: Scott Mercer. He wasn't just anyone. He had been Rachel's former boss at the marketing firm where she worked in 2005. At the time, he was a confident, well-dressed executive in his early 40s. He was respected in Portland's business community and known for his charm. Back in 2005, Mercer had been questioned briefly. He claimed he hadn't seen Rachel in weeks and had no idea what happened to her. There was no hard evidence linking him to her disappearance, so investigators had moved on. But now, nearly 19 years later, new tools allowed detectives to recheck his story with far more precision. Camila's team started by reviewing Rachel's digital footprint. With modern data recovery software, they were able to access old emails and files from her work computer that had been stored on backup servers, buried deep within the archives. They found emails between Rachel and Mercer from the weeks leading up to her disappearance. These messages were professional at first, but gradually became tense. Rachel had confronted Mercer about inconsistencies in financial reports. She had discovered something big. Mercer had been secretly embezzling large sums of money from company investors. Rachel, being honest and strong-willed, had documented everything and was preparing to expose him. The dates in her notebook matched the timeline of her investigation into his fraud. She was getting close to revealing the truth when she vanished. The team also re-examined the DNA evidence taken from Rachel's car. In 2005, it hadn't been possible to identify minor touch DNA, but in 2024, technology could detect even the smallest trace. Forensic analysts found Mercer's DNA on the inside of Rachel's car door and steering wheel, something that completely contradicted his original statement that he hadn't been near her car in years. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered financial records showing Mercer had purchased a remote property in the mountains just weeks before Rachel disappeared. This property was never mentioned in the original investigation because Mercer had bought it through a shell company to keep his name off the papers. Detective Camila brought Mercer in for questioning again. He was now a wealthy and well-known CEO, often seen in charity events and business magazines. He walked into the interview room with the same smooth confidence he had years ago, convinced he could outsmart the police. But this time was different. Camila calmly presented each piece of evidence: the DNA on Rachel's car, the newly found notebook impressions, the emails, and the secret property purchase. Mercer's confident smile slowly faded. Behind the scenes, Camila's team secured warrants to search Mercer's financial history, his properties, and his old communications. The deeper they looked, the clearer the picture became. Rachel hadn't just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. She had uncovered a dangerous secret. For nearly 2 decades, Mercer had lived freely, building his wealth and reputation, while Rachel's family suffered in silence. He had appeared at community events, even publicly donating to missing persons charities, including those supporting Rachel's search, as if to keep suspicion away from himself. But the walls were closing in. Every clue pointed toward him. The initials SM in Rachel's notebook were no longer a mystery. They were a direct link to the man who had once held power over her life, and as it turned out, had also held the key to her disappearance. By early 2024, the investigation into Rachel Sullivan's disappearance had shifted from a forgotten cold case to an active hunt for the truth. All signs were now pointing toward Scott Mercer. the man who had once been Rachel's boss, mentor, and ultimately her enemy. Detective Camila Ortiz knew that suspicion alone wasn't enough. She needed hard, undeniable evidence that tied Mercer directly to Rachel's disappearance. The key lay in the remote mountain property Mercer had secretly purchased just weeks before Rachel vanished. In 2005, this property had gone unnoticed because Mercer had cleverly hidden his name behind fake companies, but modern financial tracking exposed his involvement clearly. A search warrant was quickly obtained. A team of detectives, forensic experts, and search dogs traveled to the isolated property in the mountains. The air was cold and thin, and the landscape was covered with tall pines. The house itself was small and empty, but what caught their attention was the large concrete slab in the backyard. It looked newer than the rest of the structure, smooth and out of place. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in. When they scanned the slab, the machines picked up anomalies underneath, shapes that didn't belong. Carefully, investigators began to break through the concrete. Beneath it, buried deep in the earth, they discovered a sealed metal container. Inside were items that had been missing since the night Rachel disappeared: her purse, her keys, her phone, and several personal belongings. The moment those objects were unearthed, the air grew heavy. Everyone on the scene understood the weight of what they had found. 19 years of silence had led to this moment. For the first time, investigators had physical evidence directly linking Mercer's property to Rachel Sullivan. Back at the lab, forensic experts examined the items. The purse still contained Rachel's ID, credit cards, and receipts from the night she disappeared. The phone, although outdated, was carefully preserved. With modern data extraction tools, technicians managed to recover fragments of deleted messages and call logs from its internal memory. These fragments matched the timeline of Rachel's final hours, and they placed her nowhere near Mercer's property voluntarily. Detective Camila moved fast. With the evidence secured, a grand jury approved an arrest warrant for Scott Mercer. On the morning of April 23, 2024, Mercer was leaving his downtown office, dressed in his usual tailored suit, when a line of police cars pulled up. Officers surrounded him as pedestrians stopped to watch in shock. Cameras from nearby buildings captured the moment he was handcuffed and led away. For nearly 2 decades, Mercer had lived like a respected member of society, attending charity galas, funding scholarships, and publicly supporting Rachel's search efforts. But behind that polished image was a man who had committed a terrible crime and believed he had gotten away with it. His arrest shook Portland. News outlets ran the story for weeks, calling it one of the most significant cold case breakthroughs in the state's history. When Margaret Sullivan received the call that Mercer had been arrested, she broke down in tears. After years of walking into police stations with nothing but hope, she finally heard the words she had prayed for. "We got him." Kayla, now a young woman, sat quietly holding her grandmother's hand as the reality sank in. The man who had taken her mother from her had finally been caught. In the police interrogation room, Mercer initially tried to maintain his calm, denying everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. The DNA, the property records, the buried items, and the digital trail. He had no way out. For the first time, his smooth confidence cracked. The breakthrough was not just about solving a case. It was about giving a voice back to Rachel Sullivan, whose story had been buried in silence for far too long. The truth was finally surfacing, and justice was now within reach. After nearly 2 decades of questions, heartbreak, and relentless determination, the Sullivan family finally stood face to face with the man responsible for Rachel's disappearance. The arrest of Scott Mercer had shaken the entire city of Portland, but what followed in the courtroom would bring both justice and a powerful reminder of the strength of a family that never gave up. In the months after Mercer's arrest, the legal process began to unfold. Prosecutors built a strong case, supported by the newly uncovered DNA evidence, financial records, property links, and the personal belongings found buried beneath the concrete slab. Mercer initially entered a plea of not guilty, insisting he had nothing to do with Rachel's death. But as the evidence mounted, his defense weakened. In early 2024, prosecutors added financial fraud charges tied to the $2.7 million embezzlement scheme Rachel had discovered before she vanished. Mercer had not only taken a life, he had been stealing money from investors to fund his own luxurious lifestyle. When faced with the overwhelming evidence, Mercer finally changed his strategy. In May 2024, he agreed to a plea deal admitting to second-degree murder and financial fraud. In exchange, prosecutors agreed not to pursue life without parole. For the Sullivan family, this decision was painful but practical. A long public trial would have forced them to relive every horrifying detail, prolonging their suffering. Accepting the plea guaranteed Mercer would spend at least 25 years behind bars, and it spared them the trauma of years in court. The sentencing hearing in July 2024 was one of the most emotional days in the Sullivan family's journey. Margaret Sullivan, now 78 years old, sat in the front row of the courtroom with Kayla and Olivia beside her. As Mercer was led into the room wearing his prison uniform, the once powerful businessman looked small and defeated. For years he had hidden behind wealth, status, and lies, but in that moment, he was simply a man who had finally been unmasked. During the hearing, the family was given the chance to deliver victim impact statements. Margaret rose slowly from her seat and faced the man who had stolen her daughter's life. Her voice trembled but carried incredible strength. "You took Rachel from us," she said. "You took her future, her laughter, and her chance to watch her little girl grow up. But what you could never take was our love for her, and our promise to never stop searching for the truth." Kayla, now 22 years old and a college senior, submitted a written statement that was read aloud. She described growing up with a hole in her life where her mother should have been, birthdays without her, milestones without her hugs, and countless nights wondering what really happened. Her words brought many in the courtroom to tears. The judge sentenced Mercer to 35 years in prison, with no chance of early release for at least 25 years. For the Sullivan family, it wasn't pure relief, because nothing could bring Rachel back, but it was justice finally delivered. The impact of Rachel's case didn't end with the sentencing. Inspired by the breakthrough, the Sullivan family created the Rachel Sullivan Foundation, dedicated to supporting families of missing persons and funding advanced forensic technologies for cold cases. The foundation provides grants to law enforcement agencies to apply modern tools to forgotten investigations, ensuring that no clue remains buried forever. Kayla, who had grown up in the shadow of her mother's disappearance, found a new purpose. She decided to pursue a master's degree in psychology, focusing on helping children who have experienced trauma and loss. She often says that while knowing the truth didn't fill the void left by her mother, it allowed her to understand and heal in a way she never could before. Rachel's story became a powerful reminder to the Portland community, and beyond, that justice delayed is not justice denied. Technology, persistence, and the unbreakable bond of a family turned a cold case into a story of truth and resilience. Even after all those years, Rachel Sullivan's voice was finally heard. Her memory lives on, not as a forgotten name on a case file, but as a symbol of hope for families still searching for their loved ones. Rachel Sullivan's story is more than just a solved cold case. It's a reminder that truth can survive years of silence, that justice can be delayed but not erased, and that love and persistence can uncover what once seemed lost forever. As this case closes, many others remain unsolved. Behind every missing person is a family waiting for answers, holding on to hope just as the Sullivans did. If you found this story important, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss future cases. Share this video to help bring more attention to cold cases that deserve to be solved. Your support helps keep these stories alive and encourages ongoing investigations. Thank you for watching, and remember, every mystery has a truth waiting to be uncovered.